I am wondering, are they looking at us up in the sky? Huh. Okay, I was just pondering. Still January. Well, we have one more week to see if there's gonna be a January movie that that deserves my attention. But in the meantime, here I am talking about I.S.S, the acronym of International Space Station. Not gonna lie, guys, I was highly anticipating this movie ever since I saw the trailer. It felt suspenseful enough with an interesting premise that it hooked me. Although, when the funny thing is that when I saw the trailer, I was kind of like, that looks cool. And then January, and I was like, oh. Yeah, well, I already told you about the stigma of January movies. Although not every time it can be something like that. I mean, because either we're gonna get something like Night Swim, or we're gonna get something like The Beekeeper that it was dumb fun. But apparently there might be one or two movies that you might anticipate that comes in January. I know people were anticipating Mean Girls. I didn't felt like this movie was kind of like my cup of tea. Also, I didn't watch the original movie. I haven't seen the play, so this is why I skipped Mean Girls. Although I did kind of found it a little bit silly and silly because I don't know if that movie is a rom com, but either way, it kind of had that rom com comedy that I'm not exactly a fan of. Hint, hint, the Lovebirds. But I'm here talking about I.S.S. International Space Station. Believe it or not, that is an actual thing for those that know. You see it almost every time. You know, the news about people in space and they're working on a space station. That's what we're talking about. The International Space Station, or ISS, is this space station that is kind of a little bit close to Earth. Not it is an outer space, um, uh, and it is being used for medical research, facilities, education, and so on, so on. And like the name suggests, it is a place where many people from around the world collaborate. Most notably, companies and organizations uh, from from important country potents. Let's say that there are important countries that they make a deal in which they go there and they collaborate for the sake of science and all this stuff. Most notably, the NASA from the United States, the cosmonauts from Russia, Japan is also there. Most of Europe and Canada. This is kind of like the vague information I did with watching the internet, because like I always like to have a little bit of peak of education. Not exactly a strong one, but I kind of wanted to get the gist out of it to see what this movie was gonna be. Although in this case, they decided to minimize some of the stuff. For example, there's no Japanese people, there's no European people, or they're mostly people from. Actually, the cast is just is composed of three North American characters and three Russians. Um, so, so in a way, I, it kind of felt kind of like short. I'll get to that in a little bit, but but the thing is that they just wanted to create a movie that is basically a thriller that about the tension between Americans and Russians, and and it, and they just crammed this premise and they put them in outer space where it is bad enough considering that sometimes I get begin to think about outer space that sci-fi makes it look fun, but sometimes when you go into the thriller or horror territory, is it is a scary concept that you might not want to go into space. Although not necessarily have to be horror. One of my favorite movies from that takes place on space is Gravity, and that one is more kind of like a thriller, but and it's one of those first movies that make me think that, man, I don't want to go to space anymore. But so you gotta give them credit for going into that. But anyway, I was anticipating I.S.S. And you know what? For a January movie, I like it. I like it fine. There are a few slight problems, but I think it's mostly a little bit the execution can be a little bit wobbly, but thankfully the movie has an interesting enough premise and some good thriller techniques that it keeps the movie from being bad or unwatchable. But unfortunately, it does. I do agree that there are a few pacing issues and some decisions that at the end of the day, it just become one of those run of the mill space thriller movies. In which is fine. Sometimes getting something decently and competent is far better than giving you mediocrity like Night Swim. So my glasses just fell down. So let's go with the premise because this is where. This was my sweet spot. The movie takes place, of course, in the title I.S.S. We had three Americans, which you know what, the cast is small, so I can't tell you the name. The cast comprised of Chris Messina, Costa Ronin, and Ariana DeBose. These are the American side. Of course, the movie focuses more on Ariana DeBose since she's gonna be kind of like the main character and the audience surrogate. In a way, when I saw her name in it, I was like, well, let's see what you got. Maybe you're gonna make up for Wish. And then we got the Russian side, the cosmonauts. The actors are Pilo Gazbaik, sorry if I don't know how to speak Russian, Masha Mashkova, and John Gallagher Jr. Okay, this is gonna be a little bit of a nitpick. You got two Russian people, but to play the third Russian is American. It's not that I'm against, but I'm gonna give you kind of like a small warning that there are gonna be a few people that are gonna get a little bit too picky on that. But but you know what? Maybe I'm wrong. If I'm wrong with that, you can hit me whatever you want. Okay, let's continue on. So these space people. They're reunited in the space station. They form bonds and they begin to talk about their families. They share chocolate and vodka and the children's drawing. They do their scientific progress in it, and then Skynet happens. Okay, not really. Not as Skynet doesn't happen, but what happens is that nuclear war happens on Earth. We begin to see these big mushroom, big lights of nuclear light explosions on Earth, and almost kind of like a big chunk of Earth it turns this neon radioactive red. So nuclear war happened. Who started it? We don't know. So obviously our protagonists are pretty shocked because nobody will expect that. But then they begin to receive message from their superiors. And since this is a movie made by an American, we get to see a little bit of the American point of view. But basically they're having kind of like they have the same problem. Their superiors call. They say, "Hey, keep it a secret. This is between you and me. But you know what? Take over the ISS by any means possible." So because of that, tensions begin to happen between the Russians and the Americans. They begin to distrust each other. And the movie follows them, looking at them with total distrust, really, and somehow also even dangerous thoughts, because not at first they were friends, but of course the government says you're not friends anymore. We want that space station. Take it over by any means possible. This is a great premise. It is a premise about that is basically kind of like going back to the Cold War, but in a small confined thing. Fair enough. I don't know how big is the real ISS, but still, going into that place, it feels claustrophobic and very small. All these people are, they begin to act kind of like erratically and distrusting that you don't know what they're going to do. And so there are some people that they have kind of like their range of emotions. Our main character, Ariana DeBose, well, she does a better job than what she did on Wish. She is kind of, unfortunately, a little bit one of the weakest characters, but it's not because of her acting or anything. It's mostly because of her. This is kind of like that toll that you get when you become a protagonist. If you're a protagonist, it's gonna feel very obvious that who's gonna be the main character, who's gonna survive, who's gonna have the highest moral compass. And for a movie like that, I don't think that this could have worked. It is gonna be quite a challenge, because no matter if you're gonna make a movie about the tensions between humanity, still you're gonna need kind of like an audience surrogate to fill the role of the viewer, and this character is kind of like both. It's both an audience surrogate, but there are things that she does have some protagonist powers and a protagonist intelligence, and that kind of makes her a little bit more immune to the whole thing, and makes her kind of like in ways kind of like a very naive character, to the point that she's not interesting. but the rest of the characters they do, and they have kind of like the range of emotions. Like for example, the Costa Ronin character, he's kind of like one of the most paranoid of all the characters. The Mashkova character, she's kind of like she's kind of trying to help things out, but there come moments in which you can either trust her or not. Or Pilo as by character, he becomes kind of like the most aggressive of all the characters. The Chris Messina character is he is kind of like the passive aggressive but responsible character until things get out of hand. And the John Gallagher Jr. He's basically the a little bit the wishy-washy character. It's the best way I can describe it. Still, this is the movie's strength that the character have their own they have their own personalities that they begin to clash when things happen. I mean, in a way, you can't fault any of them, and no matter their reasons. For one, the movie does give you expositions that these characters have families and loved ones on Earth. Some say about, yeah, I got my children, I got someone that I love down there. The Ariana DeBose character, she does mention that she has a fiance. Fiance that is not a boy, I must add. that moment got stuck in my head. And because the movie's music is a little bit dry, but at the same time tension, you're just a little bit kind of like on the edge of your seat, thinking that what they're gonna pull. Although granted, some things comes a little bit predictable, but again, this is just me because I got movie experience. But this is not basically a movie weakness. It's kind of like I get a little bit too experience for that. Although I do have to complain a little bit that sometimes the exposition and the cinematography and it gets stretched out a little bit to the point that it kind of tends to get a little bit boring. And it is a 1 hour 40 minutes or something like that movie. Let me double check here. Oh, an hour 35 minutes. Maybe the hour 45 minutes that they did. It was on the AMC counter. I know. Probably the extra 10 minutes is because of the trailers. Probably that. But really, there are some moments that the movie really did felt kind of like long. And again, I want to make a little bit of a nitpick, but this is mostly because I don't know 100% about how it works on the real ISS. But having a space station with just 6 people, I don't know if it is too little. And you know what? Now that I think about it, it does have its pro and its con. For one, having just Americans and Russians, it doesn't convolute the movie with too many characters. But at the same time, it makes me curious: what will happen if this movie was bigger and they have kind of like more characters into it? Like, for example, we got the Russian team, or the Canadian team, or the French team. And now that I think about it, I'm not overstuffing this movie if I overanalyze it, because if you overstuff the idea of having kind of like this increased group of international people in one place, that will be a huge war. that would be a huge war. You know what? Now that I think about it, it was probably a bad idea when I think about it. Maybe it was the correct call to just stick with just Americans and Russians. Nothing more, nothing more, nothing less. That's uh, that's just me. Also, in a way, there's some moments of the movie that it leave me a little bit confused, but that is mostly because I sometimes it is filled with some of those scientific astronaut protocol language that it gets me a little bit confused. Another thing that I did notice while hearing some other people review, but I didn't see a problem, is that well, this is technically an American movie. There are moments in which the Russian characters they speak Russian. Although there are some moments in which in which they put the subtitles, and sometimes they don't. Or sometimes people told me that there was kind of like a version in which they didn't put the subtitles. Personally, I don't know. I didn't get that problem. Of course, there are some moments in which they speak Russian, but we are not supposed to know what it is to build up the tension. Although it does fair, it does a fair job, and I'm also a little bit glad that the movie technically doesn't take any sides. It's just it it doesn't take sides. It's kind of like neutral on the whole thing. It's just basically an interesting thriller with an interesting premise, and where it showcases well if what will happen if you're in space. Then you see that the world is technically almost gone. Well, it is not gone, but it went into its next phase of modern warfare, in which most of the world is now destroyed. There's nuclear war, and its survivors they just want to overpower each other. In this case, of course, the big bad government, they just say, we're not friends anymore. We want the space station. And whoever it is there, take it over. We don't care how you do it, just take it over. There is kind of like this government pressure that it of course it takes it is what was the word that I was saying? It gets in the way of the possibilities of a friendship or a truce, or because well the characters they feel like they are in debt to their countries, and this this is kind of like an interesting talk, and this is a movie about building trust and not to do trust and all this stuff. And when I came out of the movie, in my head, it was like, if this is a movie about trust, this movie makes a really better message about trust than freaking Raya and the Last Airbender. Raya and the Last Dragon. Yeah, I say it. Why? How many years has it been since that horrible Disney movie? And how many times did it comes to my mind? Especially because now it does have a theme of trust. And I.S.S. does a better job in that theme. All right. What else there's not much that I want to spoil. There are some good decisions. There is a kind of like a clumsy decision, and one of the thrilling parts that, of course, la-di-da-di has a consequence. And then comes a little bit the ending. The ending, it's not a bad ending, but you can tell that it was almost like, looks like we can't push it a little bit too much. So let's let's wrap it up. Let's wrap it up, and that's it. Let's go home. I'm not gonna reveal what it is, but it was kind of it gets a little bit rushed. That's the best way I can describe it. But again, it's not horrible. Probably you might find it forgiving. But still, it comes up. We understood the premise. It does its job for what it is, and you know what? Maybe I'm probably gonna forget this movie ever happened. I did have a good time. I'm not gonna deny that fact. It is a good time. Probably you might forget about it, and this is probably one of those C plus or B minus movies where it is technically a good grade, considering that this is a movie that came out in January. So there we go. I think that's all. This is all I'm gonna talk about I.S.S. If you want kind of like a space thriller with some international tensions and with an interesting theme about international trust, this is gonna be an interesting movie for you. I give it kind of like a mild recommendation depending on what you're looking for. But in the meantime, I don't know. Considering what I saw from this movie, who can we trust nowadays?